Welcome everybody to the meeting of the Licensing Committee. I'm Richard Udall, the Chair of the Licensing and Environmental Health Committee, and as per normal I've been asked to read an essay to you. Welcome to today's meeting. This is a public meeting and members of the public and press are permitted to report on the proceedings. Reporting includes filming, photographing, making an audio recording and providing commentary on proceedings. Please note this meeting is recorded and streamed live. These recordings are published on the relevant meeting page of the Council's website. By choosing to attend this public meeting, you are deemed to have given your consent to be filmed or recorded, and for any footage to be broadcast or published. If the alarm sounds, the premises must be evacuated immediately. Do not spend time collecting personal belongings. All emergency escape routes are clearly signed. Once you have left the building, the assembly point is in the High Street opposite the Guildhall. Members and other speakers are reminded to use their microphones when speaking. Have we got any appointments of substitutes?
Yes, Chair, we have a few. We have Councillor Norfolk for Councillor Agar. We have Councillor Mackay for Councillor Stephen Hodgson. And we have Councillor Lewing for Councillor Stephen. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. And I think I should say at this point that we've had the news this morning that Louis, the Vice Chair of the committee, is actually in hospital as we speak, about to have an operation. So I think it's only fair for us as a committee to send him our best wishes and good luck for the operation. Okay. Any declarations of interest? I think that's... I think maybe having a backbone put it. No, it's up to others to say. No. Okay. Public declarations of interest? There being none. Public representations, we have two. Two in front of us, Leslie Borthwick and Mr. Mohammed Sajid. Is that right? Yeah, good. Leslie, you're on my list first, so if you want to come forward.
Am I on? Okay. Good evening, councillors and chair. After over 10 years, but I think more like 15 years, when Worcester Licensing joined forces with the whole of Worcestershire, the aim was to unify all costs and policies across the whole of Worcestershire. The brunt of the costs still seem to fall on the City of Worcester drivers. While this is allowed to carry on, there will always be cross-bordering where we will have Wychavon vehicles working in Worcester and you having no control over them, and the licences fees going into the coffers of Wychavon rather than the City of Worcester. To control this, we need to look at the age criteria and the costs of the plates elsewhere, compared to the City of Worcester. Age criteria in Wychavon is just an age up to. So you can plate a vehicle up to the age of 10 years for a saloon and 12 years for a wheelchair adapted vehicle. If we adopted the same policy of an up to an age, this would mean that drivers could look for lower mileage cars rather than high mileage cars. Just because a vehicle is under 3 years and 5 years for a private hire does not mean it has been looked after. Also, I'd like to point out that the cost of the vehicles is at an all-time high, and getting hold of vehicles under 3 years old is challenging, especially the wheelchair adapted ones due to vehicles not being made during COVID. The fees should be considered as well. At the moment, to plate a vehicle in Worcester City, it is for a Hackney £360, whereas Wychavon, it's £236 for a private hire. £330 in Worcester and £230 in Wychavon, even down to the operator's licence. Worcester, £990 and Wychavon, £486. My question is why, as the same staff at Worcestershire Licensing do exactly the same job for City of Worcester and Wychavon drivers. But whilst the cost of running a vehicle in the City of Worcester exceeds the Wychavon vehicles, you always have cross-boarding and money is meant for Worcester City, as they are working on apps in Worcester City and go into Wychavon Council rather than the Worcester City. Obviously, the electric vehicles will come under a different age criteria, but also hybrid vehicles need to be looked at in this new greener policy due to the unknown mileage of charging points, etc. Thank you for taking the time of listening.
Thank you, Leslie.
Thank you.
in response, I've got a few things to say. First of all, there's the consultation exercise, which if agreed today will enable you to participate and make the similar comments, what you made this evening. Also, I have a lot of sympathy with what you were saying about other district councils and the need for conformity. Obviously, each district is responsible for its own policies and its own procedures, but we, after a lot of effort, have managed to get all licensing chairs and vice chairs across the county in one meeting to sit down to discuss this. And one of those things which we've asked our officers to do is to go away and come back with proposals on how we can start standardisation. As far as I'm concerned, any standardisation will not mean any lowering of standards by Worcester. Others have to come up to our standard. But that's what everybody will probably have to say as well. On the issue of the hybrid vehicles, I think if you make that point known in the consultation, I think that will be taken into account when it reports back to committee at the next meeting. Thank you for your participation. It's been very useful. Mr. Sajid, it's over to you. You have 5 minutes.
Good evening, councillors. My wishes to Louis, if you could, I hope he gets better. I didn't know he was ill. I did message him last week, but I think he's probably been ill since last week. So my best wishes towards him. And good evening, everybody. Got a few issues. Some of the drivers contacted me at the weekend. It's been going on for a fair few weeks now. I don't know if you can see that. That's New Street. Now, enforcement is needed. After 10 o'clock at night, yourselves know, I think you need to be there now, early hours of the morning, from 10 at night till 4 in the morning, you will have a lot of activity. We can't get onto that rank at New Street. The public are so ignorant, it's unbelievable. A lot of them are working at this club, Labroth, and that's a fact. Because I confronted the lad and he said, tell the police. I told the officer, he said, it's up to the enforcement team. It's not happened. January, February, 2 months gone. I came out mid-January and I witnessed this, and not just this, on the rank, on the taxi rank. Unbelievable. Have a look at that. Few vehicles parked there. That's the ignorance of these people. They're not interested in taxis. They couldn't care less. And I mean, I've got a lot of pictures, the drivers sending me pictures as well. And I said, I did have a chat with the association chairperson, but he doesn't seem to be interested. I do not know why. A couple of people have spoken to Richard about it. There was another one, a van, a builder, been working all day, and then he's drink driving. I think the police did catch up with him. This is what's happening. Because there's no parking attendance, they're getting away with it. And then I did tell the officer, you need to book him. The officers waited for him, and they had a result. But because there's no enforcement again, the police their hands are tied apparently, because I think the jurisdiction it's under your, Niall, I believe. It's up to the council to put out traffic wardens, be it if you have to employ one now at 10 at night to work at the 4 in the morning, he will have a result. You will generate a lot of income, which obviously, you know, I was going to come to Mr. Lloyd. You don't need to put our fees up. We pay a hell of a lot in Worcester. You know, for the last 10 years, our fees have been sky high. I mean, obviously the neighbouring council standards, which are even Malvern Pershaw's, there needs to come above. But are you actually pushing for this? Because, I mean, lowering the standards in city, there's no need. I mean, is there an emissions report done? How bad the city centre is? You've got all those delivery drivers, the traffic work going on in the whole of the city, it's at standstill. I mean, there's a lot of emissions. I mean, we don't need, I mean, obviously, I'm singing a different hymn to Leslie Borthwick because I'm not interested in Whithaven. I'm interested in saving this city. If you guys want to save this city, be it lower it to 2-year standards or 1.5 years, or when we do have the transitional period in 2030, if the electric cars are viable, at the moment, a Tesla is not viable. I actually drove one for 2 weeks. I kept stopping to recharge it, and all the charging points were full. Service stations everywhere. I came stuck. I was actually there. I only done 3 hours work in that Tesla. It's not viable. It's not viable at all. But I mean, the standard should never be lowered in this city. We set a bar high for the last 10 years in 2014-15. We've already gone through this, Richard. So, I mean, Chair, you don't need to go back in time. We need to go forward. Are you guys actually going to take the city forward? You need to block the neighbouring areas. Their vehicles are picking up from this city. I've got a Wolverhampton vehicle, which I actually took his photo, in this city. They drop off, then they hang around. The public are coming out of nightclubs. They see them and they say, log on to your app, we'll take you. That should never be taking place. Why is it taking place? We've got no enforcement. than the drivers that are sitting on the police cones. That should never be happening. Of course, no enforcement. Look at that. That's a Uber vehicle from Wolverhampton. Parked at Angel Place. No enforcement. He dropped off, sat there for 45 minutes. People came out of Velvet Lounge. They saw him. They gone up to him, logged onto the app, and he took them. That should never be happening. There you go, guys. I've got all the evidence here. Again, Niall, 2 months I've seen no enforcement in the city. Why? It's non-existent. We should be working together. I'll take time out and show you all the problems. We've never done it for the last 4 or 5 years. I've been shouting time after time. The drivers are messaging me at the weekend, we've got this problem, but the enforcement aren't interested. So I would like to work with you this weekend. Can we do that Friday and Saturday early hours of the morning? I mean, if you could give me your answer, that'd be appreciated. Even Lloyd, you could come out, have a look at the mess being created. This city is failing on every level. And first of all, you could come and see it with me, guys. It'd be an eye-opener. Thank you.
Sorry, I have to wind you up there because
That's okay, thank you.
5 minutes.
Thank
Can
you.
I thank you very much for your presentation? I have to challenge you on the fact that you said there's been no enforcement. There has been enforcement. We introduced late night enforcement in the city last year, and just this last weekend, 41 penalty charges were ordered, were given for vehicles for non-compliance matters in the taxi areas. Some of those actually being maybe even taxi drivers, I do not know. But 41 fixed penalty notices were issued this weekend, last weekend, sorry, and that is clearly obvious, but some enforcement has taken place. Now, what we do need to do is make sure the enforcement is taking place at the right time, at the right place, at the time which is needed, and that's something which we need to have a conversation about. I think it would be wise for us to invite you to future taxi forum meetings so you can actually participate with us in a better forum than as a licensing committee, so we can actually have this discussion and work out exactly what enforcement is needed and where and when, so we can actually help you to do your job. Thank you very much for your participation here today.
Thank you.
Okay, minutes of the previous meeting. Is it your wish that they be signed as a truish record? Yes. Councillor Cronin?
Am I connected? Yes. There were a couple of issues I wanted to raise under paragraph 56. The first thing I want to draw attention to, neither of these are things that are new to the committee. I've been going on about it for a while. The cross rank is a rank for 7 vehicles. It only holds 7 vehicles if they pull tight up against each other. The length of the rank has been reduced by the new road design. That rank now holds 6 vehicles unless they overrank. Now, I know we can say that there have been other ranking spaces added here and there. The use of the bus stop on the Cathedral Square is helpful. It's not on the cross. Cross is the most important rank in the city. I want to register this once again, that the most important rank in the city has lost a place. I don't know what we do about it, but we need to find a way of compensating the taxi users of the city for the loss of that amenity. The other thing, I've slightly had my thunder taken, but it was about the misuse of the taxi ranks, which again I've been going on about for a long time. The New Street rank is a particularly annoying example, because we've tried every way to stop the misuse of that rank. I suspect that the problem is coming from the same direction every time. My suggestion has always been that we use CCTV as a means of enforcement. I have no doubt that New Street is covered by a fairly comprehensive CCTV coverage. We don't need to deploy enforcement officers necessarily every weekend. All we need to do is look at the CCTV coverage, get the number plates off the vehicles and send them their little surprise through the post. Because they are running rings around the system. They know when the enforcement is going to be there, if and when it happens. And they're just using those ranks when they know it's safe for them to do it. With CCTV, it's never safe for those ranks to be abused.
Thank you, Simon. I've allowed a bit of latitude here because I think it's the only way you could probably raise those issues here today. This meeting, apart from any other business, which I wouldn't have. Yeah, I know. Okay, I'm allowing, as I said, I'm allowing a little latitude here. I think the issue which you raised regarding the number of vehicles on the cross is an issue for Worcestershire Highways. We're not the Highways Authority, and they determine how the design works. But it's something which maybe we can talk about outside the room and how we can raise that with them to see what can be done to help. The issue about enforcement, I'm not sure, Niall, if you can respond to the suggestion about CCTV, or whether it might be easier for us to actually refer this again to the taxi forum and invite Simon to attend to raise his concerns directly with us at a time which is more appropriate.
Thank you, Chair. I'm probably not the best person to talk about CCTV enforcement cameras. We have a dedicated team who deal with the city centre's CCTV system. I'm aware that there are lots and lots of different sorts of cameras, some for general observations, some for enforcement, sort of red routes, those sort of things. So I think the question needs to be asked with the relevant departments: what can be done with the CCTV system that is in place in Worcester City, if anything, in relation to parking? I think that's the question we need to ask. That's the first question, and then we can really work from there.
Okay, we'll have that discussion with the parking people in the city, and we'll bring back a response to a future meeting based on the issues which you've asked. I've just noticed that the minutes actually say taxi rank reinforcement. I think that should be enforcement. Or maybe not, maybe not in the circumstances. But thank you, Simon. And as I said, I appreciate the rest of the committee's patience in allowing you to raise that issue. Can we move on then to the agenda item number 5? And I think this is you, Niall.
Thank you, Chair. Members, yes, it's page 7, so agenda item number 5 of your report pack. And this is a proposal to review the Hackney Carriage and Private Hire Vehicle Age Policy. Now, this report, as I'm sure you'll be aware, came about from a report which was put forward in December in relation to electric vehicles. We are trying to encourage the transition from fossil fuel vehicles to electric vehicles. And at that time, a proposal was put forward in relation to fees. Now, in line with that, we need to put in place policies, procedures to try and encourage the uptake of the vehicles. Fees just isn't enough. So we need to look at other avenues. Now, of course, the background in the report gives all information of where Worcester City stands at the moment in relation to the climate emergency and the strategic policies, and the commitment to look at their transport policies. Well, of course, one of them is in taxis, which is why we're sitting around the room today discussing this particular matter. We're also working with other Worcestershire districts, as the Chair alluded to. There has been a meeting to discuss policies. Now, we are getting some leeway with this. As you know, we adopted the driver policies in 2021, which was a policy which was adopted across Worcestershire with minor adaptations for the local districts. And again, we're going to look at similar, where we can, I'll put that caveat in there, where we can in relation to vehicles. As I mentioned, during the December meeting, the decision was made to waive fees in relation to electric vehicles, but also to undertake some stakeholder engagement. So that with the taxi drivers, to see if there's any appetite for a change in the age policy. So before we bring it back to this committee for approval to go out to consultation, we wanted to see if it was in line with the drivers' wishes and also councillors, to see whether that was something that warranted further work. Well, it seems that it is. Certainly that trade owner engagement in relation to the electric vehicle policy was unanimous. Age limits be removed for electric vehicles moving forward. But also, off the back of that, there was also a question in relation to the existing vehicles which are currently on the fleet, and these are the fossil fuel diesel and petrol vehicles. Because it was indicated that, well, actually, in order to assist the drivers financially to transition and be able to save up to purchase the electric vehicles, which we are aware are expensive. There's no getting away from that matter, and the availability is limited at the moment, although the second-hand market is improving. There is also a proposal, or we're looking at maybe a relaxation or amending the upper age or the lower age limit of vehicles entering the fleet. So in the report, you will see that we've attached the vehicle age policy, albeit it's hidden within the policy, but it gives details of the current age limit. I think the key figures that you need to look at are the age limit of 3 years, and that's the entry age limit for vehicles entering Worcester's fleets, Hackney Carriage, the Hackney Carriage vehicles, so that's saloon and purpose built. The question was asked to drivers, what should it be changed to? Should it be 3, should it be 4 years, should it be 5 years? And the majority of respondents have said that yes, they would support certainly a 5-year age limit amendment. So that's what we're looking at. There is a proposal in there, and you'll see that the preferred option is, first of all, in relation to the electric vehicles, that age limits be removed, and that officers undertake an 8-week formal consultation. And this is a public consultation, because whilst we do have the drivers and the vehicle owners in mind, we need to take into account the views of the people who use the vehicles as well. Do they want older vehicles on the fleet, entering the fleet? So we need to get the views of all stakeholders, and also safety groups, disabled groups, to see their views when making a final decision. So when it's presented back to this committee, that we have a rounded picture of everybody's views in relation to this. Similarly, the alternative option, as I've mentioned, is an amendment to the council's policy in relation to the lower age limit from 3 years to 5 years. So again, we'll get views on that and bring them back to the council for a further decision. Financial implications in relation to the consultation, they will be undertaken within existing budgets, so it's a straightforward consultation which we have plans in place to undertake. The legal implications, again, are contained within your report. One of the main things when it comes to policies is that consultation. It's key. You must consult whenever any proposal to amend a policy, certainly in relation to taxes, is undertaken, so that you have all of the information to hand when making that final decision, which is why we're proposing an 8-week consultation, so that we can get it back to this committee, hopefully with all of the responses in June. And any longer, we may struggle to get it back to this committee. We wouldn't want to delay this item any further. Those are really the matters for consideration. The recommendations are contained within your report, and it is that we go out to consultation in relation to electric vehicles to amend the age limit, to get rid of both age limits, and in relation to the current fleet of fossil fuel vehicles, extend the lower age limit from 3 years to 5 years. So that's a matter for consideration, Chair. I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Thank you, Niall. I think it's worth saying at this point that both the Vice Chair and myself have made it quite clear that we have not made up our minds. This is a genuine consultation. We want to hear from the public and from the trade. And I think you've heard tonight there are 2 different views which have come forward with complete poles apart in their capacity. But we want to know what the views are before we make up our mind, and take the position further. No decisions have been made, and we will be aided and decide upon the consultation returns. Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you, Chair. Vehicle technology has moved on significantly in the last 10 or 15 years, and so moving the age from 3 to 5 years doesn't cause me any concern. I'll tell you what does cause me concern, and I come from some experience having been an equipment support engineer in the army, looking after vehicles for 20 years and doing it for the last 17 years in defence industry. Just because it's an electric vehicle doesn't mean it's any safer than a diesel vehicle. The braking system, the upholstery, all those steering rack and pinion, they're all the same. So how we could arbitrarily say that an electric vehicle doesn't need to be age limited purely because it's electric, and I get the green element of it, But that's a massive leap of faith, and I'd like to see where the engineering or the sort of VOSA stamp of authority comes on that. Whether it's electric or diesel, the age limit should be the same. And I understand electric vehicles are expensive, but safety is paramount. And if we're saying that electric vehicles can never be aged, then why would we say that a diesel vehicle needs to be aged or a petrol vehicle? So that argument doesn't wash with me, I'm afraid. But I'm sure someone will come back and give me some evidence to support that.
Chair, thank you, Councillor Mitchell. It's a really good point, and I think probably for officers, it's one that we may have underplayed slightly. I think we've been in the camp that you're absolutely right, Councillor Mitchell. You know, developments have moved on. We've probably been working on the basis that if drivers are going to transition, it'll probably be towards more modern types of vehicles, so they've got the mileage range to be able to fulfill their duties. But you're absolutely right. I think you made a really valid point, and that's one we will absolutely take back as part of our considerations.
Hands all round the room. Councillor Cronin first.
Thank you, Chair. I completely agree with Councillor Mitchell. I think the removal of age limit restrictions on all electric vehicles, which I agree with, shows that we have been applying this rather clumsy mechanism unfairly up until now with the shortly to be obsolete style of vehicle. My position has always been that age, and I think Leslie mentioned this in her presentation, that the maintenance of the vehicle is what keeps it safe. And we have a very effective regime of inspecting vehicles twice a year. I think that we should leave the detailed judgments to people who are experts at looking at vehicles, and we should accept what they say about whether a vehicle is fit to be used in the taxi trade until its next inspection is due. Having said that, I will go along with this. I'm not going to suggest that we do away with the age restrictions across the board, but I leave that point that the overarching considerations should be in the hands of people who are experts at making a judgment on a vehicle.
Just very quickly, Chair, just so that members are aware, there is no recommendation going forward to amend the testing regime that's in place for these vehicles. They will be compliant, or they will be required to undertake the 2 vehicle compliance tests per year as any other vehicle. So it's really just the age policy that we're looking at, nothing else in relation to safety or the requirements of vehicles. But yes, take on board certainly your comments on the age.
Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Chair. I'm very much in two minds, as you've said yourself. I mean, I'm very concerned that this committee also listens to environmental health. They also sit on health and well-being, and their concerns about particulate pollutions and air pollutions. We seem to be sort of supporting our taxi drivers and yet faulting ourselves when we're trying to improve our air quality. We know it's an issue. So what I was wondering is there any form of air quality check that's done as part of these tests, and is there a mechanism we can put in there? Do we check them while they're idling, for instance, and could there be some form of recommendation made with that? So, you know, so that they're not actually producing lots of toxins while they're sat idling.
Can you clarify the test?
Part of their testing regime, or as part of an environmental impact?
Well, it's part of their test regime, yeah.
Yeah, so as part of MOT testing, that would pick up emissions as part of the sort of routine MOT test. By way of any other monitoring, then there is no specific monitoring of emissions from taxis, and we would have no reason or interest to do that. Obviously, we've got the wider work around air quality monitoring around the city, but at the moment, I think it's reasonable to assume that the MOT testing would pick up the performance of the taxi vehicle.
Yeah, I am, as you say, not very sure about this one, because we are trying to hit 2030, and yet we're going to allow older vehicles to continue. It's trading one thing to gain another, and I understand that the trade has been through a lot of trouble, but we also need to be moving forward as well.
Chair, just as a reminder, councillors, it is a consultation and you are invited to put forward your views as part of that consultation. And we very much like you to. We want those views in the consultation so that we consider them when we bring it back in June.
Steve Mackay.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of points. The first, bearing in mind that you are consulting with the other districts as well, appreciating the issues about wanting to get this consultation over and done with pretty quickly, would there be a thought about doing a county-wide consultation on this so that we get everything all together? I'm just thinking of what our speaker said down there earlier in relation to other issues in relation to taxes. This could be yet another situation where we end up with a lot of different things coming together, whereas all one, we would perhaps make a start to moving together for the districts. That's the first thing. And secondly, unless anybody says differently, just thinking about risk factors and health and safety and such like, is taxis are very regularly moving slowly around the town centre when they're pulling out and such like. Now, as an older person with a bit of a hearing issue, I've walked into the path of an electric vehicle in the backyard here when it's been moving. And I'm just thinking about the noise factor, the fact that it is silent, whether or not there should be any thought given to any changes on that idea, or whether we can even, but just a couple of considerations for you.
The first question, certainly when we're talking about a county-wide policy, now you'll recall that I mentioned obviously the taxi standards, they were driven by government. So they very much had a number of recommendations which the council, were almost asked to put into place. With regards to vehicles, it's still very much down to the individual council to make their own mind up. So as Worcestershire Regulatory Services, we work across the board and we can present ideas to the council, but it's very much your decision as to whether you take them on board or not. With regards to a county-wide policy, I think we certainly wouldn't be getting anything back in June, and I think the practicalities of trying to get everybody to agree on a policy, certainly at a district committee level, would be difficult. So I think, not that it's my recommendation, I think that we probably carry on with what we're doing today with an eye on a county-wide policy at a later date. And the best practice guidance for vehicles from the DFT is currently under publication. It'll be published sometime soon. Can't give you a date. I remember I was always promising the best practice guidance on drivers, which took nearly 3 years to come in. But yeah, I believe it is going to be published soon. So again, that will be brought back to this committee, where the committee can review and put forward further recommendations in relation to vehicles. In relation to electric vehicles and the noise that they generate, not a consideration up until you mentioned it 2 minutes ago. I'm aware that they're quiet. That would be a safety matter. It's not something that's being considered as part of the age consultation. But again, the wider view around vehicles, yeah, it's certainly something that can be looked at.
I actually begin to feel sorry for Worcestershire Regulatory Services having to deal with so many district councils with conflicting policies and procedures. It's probably very similar to trying to get a new treaty agreed in the European Union. It might be quicker to do that rather than to get local authorities to agree, but we are working towards trying to gain some unification of policy amongst the district councils, and we've had our first ever meeting, and I think that's progressing hopefully, to something which we can sign off in the future. But to try and get consent amongst all those local authorities before June would be an interesting task, to say the least. But I hear what you're saying. The recommendations are that, oh, sorry, Councillor Cochrane.
Lucy as well, Chair.
Sorry?
And Lucy as well. Lucy was first.
Lucy was first. Okay, Lucy.
I just want to comment about the no upper age limit for electric cars, particularly second-hand electric cars. Does this mean that we will accept any age? And again, hearing what Chris has said about the age and the and that sort of thing as well, are we really going to accept this?
The answer to the first question is yes. It's any age vehicle. That's exactly what the policy says. And that's a matter for consultation. Councillor Mitchell's raised concerns, as have others, and clearly you have concerns as well. Again, put it forward in the consultation. It will be considered, certainly when we're looking at the results and the report that's presented back to committee in June.
Okay.
Chair, can I just add, it may seem a bit arbitrary this evening to pick a number for a maximum age limit, but if members were minded, they still have an opportunity this evening. But if they wish to amend that for the purposes of consultation, they can, albeit I think neither me and Niall are in a position to be able to provide a number for debate, but I am conscious it's been raised by a couple of members, so I just throw that in helpfully.
I don't think it would be a good idea for us to, without advice, professional advice, to come up with any such proposal. However, it may be something which we would want to ask within the consultation as a request for information from the public and from the trade and from experts who can be able to advise us on what that should be. Councillor Cochrane.
Thank you, Chair. So I think there are two issues really with regards to kind of environmental health. One is carbon footprint. And one thing which we know about vehicles is that a huge proportion of their carbon footprint is in them being made. So it's their embodied carbon rather than their emissions and use of fossil fuels. So from the point of view of carbon footprint, using well-maintained fossil fuel vehicles for longer is, in the sort of short to medium term, better than making people buy a new electric vehicle, for instance. So I'm in favour of well-maintained vehicles being used for longer as a way to not worsen our carbon footprint. The other issue is air quality, and of course we have the air quality real-time monitors that will be coming on stream. Yet again, with that, what I see is that the taxis, with the requirements that they have of biannual testing and stricter criteria for their maintenance than our domestic vehicles, that their emissions are likely to be better controlled than most people's home vehicles. So encouraging people to use a taxi rather than own a vehicle actually is good for air quality too. I don't see any kind of value, therefore, in an arbitrary, number of years, more stricter emissions criteria for their checks. So, I mean, I would be in favour of stricter emissions criteria, but without any criteria based on the number of years the vehicle is.
I was about to put the proposition to members, but you've provoked two members to indicate they wish to speak, and both members have gone only a little bit. So Councillor Cronin first and Councillor...
It really is a very brief question. How old is the oldest electric vehicle right now?
You mean in general? On the fleet, there are no electric vehicles on the fleet.
So if I may, Chair, I think what Simon's trying to say is, what's the oldest production electric vehicle out there that someone would realistically be able to use? Is it 6 years? Is it 10 years? I think that's where you're at, isn't it, Simon?
I don't think our officers will be able to answer that question. No, but it's a good question you can put in the consultation, so they'll then have to work it out and find out for you. Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Chair. Is it possible to build into this policy something about idling at taxi ranks? Because that is quite a disgusting habit. And is there any way of reducing it? They're wasting. I know they are looking to creep forward. They're keeping their phones, they're keeping the vehicles warm. But it really is. If you walk down the cross, you are choked. And I've had residents complain about it, and I've been unable to give them an answer on it. But is there any way of building in some form of discussion with the taxi drivers? You know, we've got lean, but I had an old Polo in 2006 that if you stopped the engine and brought it out, it cut the engine and it restarted it. It is possible to keep the vehicle.
Not sure
producing
that's
less.
relevant to these items, but I'll indulge you and ask for an answer if there was any policy which can enforce.
Certainly not in relation to this paper that's been presented today, because this is simply in relation to vehicle ages. When it comes to vehicle idling, we have included it within the penalty point scheme. So it's part of the penalty point scheme, and points can be issued. We wouldn't issue points off the back of sort of members of the public putting forward complaints or evidence of idling, but we'd certainly look at authorised officers of the council in enforcement, licensing, civil enforcement, and the like, and enforce it. So it is there already. So it is part of the policy, but not sort of written in with paragraphs and paragraphs in relation to engine idling. I believe it is an offence, and fixed penalty can be issued, but it's clunky, bit of legislation. It's not favoured by local councils for that reason. So I think what we can do is certainly have a word with officers, remind them of the necessary or the requirement for the drivers not to be sitting in their vehicles idling, although we are expecting some cold weather soon, and the way they keep themselves warm is by keeping their engines running and their heaters going. So yeah, we'll certainly raise it with officers.
Are we happy to support the recommendation which is in front of us, with the subject to a couple of changes which have been suggested by members, for us to go forward with consultation and come back to us at our June meeting? Are we happy with that, people? Thank you very much. We now move on to the next agenda item, which is agenda item 6 on page 95, Cumulative Impact Policy Review, Licensing Act 2003. I'm speaking slowly so Noel can get to the page.
Just scrolling all through a taxi policy here.
See, computers don't always make life easier, do they?
There we go.
Okay, Niall.
Thank you, Chair. Members, yes, if you could turn to page 95, as mentioned, it's agenda item number 6. So this is the Cumulative Impact Policy Review under the Licensing Act 2003. Members should be aware that Worcester City has in place a special policy within its statements of licensing policy referred to as cumulative impact. The Home Office guidance states that cumulative impact is the potential impact on the promotion of the licensing objectives of a number of licensed premises concentrated in one area. Now, as you're aware, Worcester City has a lot of licensed premises concentrated in one area, which is why that policy was relevant and why it was introduced in the onset back in 2004. It has been reviewed, it's been kept under constant review, and there is a requirement for the council to, there's a legal requirement now which came in a number of years ago that we have to review it regularly, every 3 years. Now, unfortunately, this is out of step with the review of the statements of licensing policy, which is every 5 years, which is coming to this council, I believe, in the next couple of years. So which is why it's being presented today. This is really just to bring members up to speed with where we're at and what we're proposing to do. The process is very much that the council will engage with its partners, mainly the police and public health, and ask for their views in relation to statistics around crime and disorder, antisocial behaviour and public health matters. This then informs the council's community of impact assessment, which really informs the council on what should be done in relation to their current policy. Should it be amended? Should we look at the nature of the premises that are being captured by the policy? Should the times change? All sorts of things that are presented. Now, at the last review of the community of impact policy, the policy actually changed the area of the city which was being governed and the nature of the premises. It focused very much on those premises which could be viewed as causing the problem. Your late night premises, the ones that go into the early hours, your late night takeaways where, you know, members of the public tend to gather, where the sort of crime hotspots of the city are located. So that is what was looked at. So that is again what we are going to do on this occasion. Following this report, we will be engaging with West Mercia Police and asking them to talk to their statisticians and start producing all of the relevant information which is necessary to inform the community of impact assessment. For example, the current community of impact policy is attached to your report, Appendix 1, and it's contained within the community of the statement of licensing policy as mentioned. It is an information report. You are merely asked to note that the process is starting. There isn't a decision as such coming out of this report. That will be at the next committee, hopefully to bring this back before the members in June, so that you can see the proposed amendments to the policy, view the community of impact assessment which has taken place, which informs the policy, and then we will go out to consultation with our stakeholders. Members, I'm happy to answer any questions, should you have any, in relation to the policy. Thank you.
As Niall said, this takes place every 3 years. It must admit, it feels like only yesterday when we did this the last time. It took a lot of hard work and we made a number of forms and changes last time, some significant changes by reducing the area. I think it's important for members to be aware that it needs to be evidence-based if we do make any changes, and any changes which happen have to stand up to scrutiny. I've got 2 people indicating to speak. Councillor Barnes first, and then, yeah.
Thank you, Chair. As the new CIZ is based on information between 2016 and 2018, before Cathedral Plaza was really up and running, is there a need to re-look at that area? Because it's a public open space where there are lots of places where people eat and drink, and I could see a potential there that needs maybe a review.
As I mentioned, the statistics which come from the police are citywide, so they're not just for the community of impact area. So if there is evidence to say that particular part of the city is causing a problem and it needs looking at, then yes, it will be brought forward and put in the community of impact assessment. As I mentioned previously, at the last review, it was very much the sort of vertical drinking establishments, your nighttime, where it's solely alcohol that is being consumed on the premises. Now, Cathedral Plaza, as you say, probably wasn't incorporated as much in the last review because it was just getting going. But the majority of the premises are sort of eateries and restaurants, but it does have an impact on the city itself. So the answer to the question is yes, it will be considered as part of the assessment.
If I remember rightly, last time we actually took it out when it was in previously, and that was based again on evidence that there was lack of problems in that area. Councillor Stafford, then Councillor Cronin.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. The part of the policy I find a bit weak in terms of is the public health side. You know, with public order, antisocial behaviour, you know, you've got a very immediate impact, and you can obviously trace it back to the drinking on that night in that establishment, or the gatherings at a food, takeaway food outlet following a night in the town. But to chuck in public health just seems a bit of a stretch to me when you're talking about people potentially drinking over many decades in different locations, you know, diseases that's going to take a very long time to create, and people can be drinking in so many different environments other than the community of impact zone. So I mean, to me, it just doesn't seem relevant to to the policy, and it's almost like just chucking more stuff in for the sake of it. So I'm just wondering, is that mandated, or is there a way we could just remove it? 'Cause to me,
I
weakens it.
believe they are a statutory consultee,
Yeah,
we have no choice about, but I'll stand corrected if I'm wrong.
Yes, they are very much so. Obviously, the police are our main source of information into crime statistics within the city, and information in relation to crime and social behaviour and the like. Public health, it is relevant, just simply in relation to there is an expectation that they have access to other information, which is hospital data in relation to assaults which have taken place, alcohol related. I think in the NHS there are questionnaires which take place with every admission, which then relate it back to alcohol. And of course, that is the main thing when you look at the Licensing Act. You know, the Licensing Act is there to control the sale of alcohol. And look at licensable activities. You're right, a lot of the other information in relation to historical diseases in relation to alcohol use may not be particularly relevant to the matters that we are considering in relation to the premises which are being licensed in the city centre, but they are entitled to have their say. So we will still consult with them and present that information to members for consideration.
Thank you, Chair. First thing I want to say, it would have been helpful if we'd had somebody from the police here to help to explain this. So presumably a lot of this data is generated by them. I can't really get my head around the logic of some of this, and looking through Appendix 2, page 148 and 151, we've got number of licensed premises by postcode, number of complaints by postcode. The use of postcodes, it seems to be an arbitrary way of accumulating this information. One postcode in the city centre is completely different from another, not just in size, but in situation. Having said that, on page 151 and on 158, 148, both of those diagrams, if you look at the very bottom of the page, which is Sidbury going off the bottom of the map, those have got a high number of licensed premises, and on 151 it's the only area shown on the map which is coloured in red with the number of complaints. So the logic of why the proposal is to reduce the impact zone actually further away from Sidbury, it escapes me. I've always been fairly critical of using cumulative impact zone in any case. I think it's a very blunt tool, and personally I would like us to find some other way of dealing with this. As I understand it, I may be wrong, that we have a presumption to approve an application for a license unless it's in a cumulative impact zone where there's a presumption to reject. I would very much like for there to be no presumption either way. And if that were the case, I'd be happy for the cumulative impact zone to be as big as anybody would like to propose it, because then it doesn't tie our hands. As it is, we're having to, in some cases, rather harshly turn down applications which we know would be reasonable simply because they're in a cumulative impact zone, and we have to presume a refusal unless they can jump through lots of hurdles. Likewise, the other way around, I don't like the presumption to approve where it's not in the zone. So hopefully, when we come to make a decision, we can make some progress on that.
I share a lot of your views and concerns around this. I have to say that the appendix which you refer to is the current policy and has already been adopted. So that was based on the evidence which we already received. And the issue you raised around Sidbury, I believe, was about one complainant about one establishment who made regular complaints. So it does skew the figures a little. My view has always been that cumulative impact studies is a restrictive practice, and we should have as few restrictive practices as possible in the entertainment industry. But when the whole process, which we're going to go ahead with, is going to be a long, hard, difficult process, which I envisage, as like we did last time, having member seminars about and having actual information from the police and other agencies, including the BID and others, who can come forward and give us advice in the privacy of a member seminar, so we can actually understand this process better, and the police will be fully part of that process. Did you want to add anything?
Just very quickly, that yes, I know that members see it as sort of quite obstructive to new premises, but it isn't. You know, it's a tool that is available to the council if used properly, where you're getting the right sort of businesses coming into the city centre. Yes, there is a presumption to refuse if an objection has been raised, but it still has to be evidenced. It isn't an immediate refusal. You know, the evidence has to be quality evidence. It has to be presented to members in such a way that it supports the community of impact policy. Just simply put an objection in doesn't necessarily refuse an application. That is for members' consideration. And in fact, we've had a number of applications for premises within the community of impact zone or area that have been granted to late night refreshment houses and to licensed premises. I think, in fact, there is probably only one that I can recall has been refused. And that was very much on the poor presentation which was made at the time from the applicant. So it's a tool to be used. It's not an arbitrary tool for refusal. It's really so that applicants who submit their applications, submitting quality applications, are prepared to justify what steps they're going to go to promote the licensing objectives. And that's what we want as a city.
Councillor Hodgson?
Thank you. Certainly on more than one occasion at licensing subcommittees, the police have come in and explained to us about how an establishment wouldn't be suitable, and we've concurred with that, and perhaps certainly at least one occasion we've actually rejected it because of this fact. So actually I think it's actually a useful tool.
Thank you. Councillor Cochrane.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to comment about the public health aspect and consulting on that, because yeah, I think that the data that could be supplied by the Public Health Department at Worcestershire County Council, I'm not convinced that it's going to provide data that is actually going to be particularly useful for assessing the public health impact of the area. The reason that I say that is that public health comes under Worcestershire County Council. The healthcare is run by the Integrated Care Board, which is Herefordshire and Worcestershire. And I think that the more salient data could be provided by West Midlands Ambulance Trust, which doesn't come under either of those bodies, rather than hospital information, which would be very, very poor in quality for the purposes of this assessment. So it's just a comment for your consideration when assessing the public health impact.
I may be wrong, and I probably am, but I believe that Public Health do collate Ambulance Trust data as well, and you do use it. But Lloyd?
Am I on? Yeah. Yeah, so West Mids Ambulance Service or the Trust aren't statutory consultees, Public Health are. And Councillor Udall is absolutely right. The expectation is that Public Health will collate that information from across health-related agencies. However, it's a public consultation, isn't it?
Yeah.
So there will be nothing stopping the Trust or West Mids Ambulance Service from putting their own submission in if they felt it. But what we can do, Councillor Cochrane, is feed your comments back to Public Health. Because what we did receive last time was quite a high-level generic response from Public Health, which Councillor Stafford referred to earlier, and what we need is something a bit more meaningful.
Thank you, Chair. I was wondering if there's any consultation from the staff and relating to abuses they may have received, and if that could be indexed in as well.
You mean our own staff, or do you mean the staff of the clubs?
Generally, anybody working in the nighttime economy, people out and about, and I noticed that as Councillor Cronin had, that there was this big clump of complaints, and I'm wondering if that's to do with the density of the population and this type of population there. You know, that you're more likely to get complaints from people who are in a residential situation, who are bothered by late night revellers coming out, than you are by people who live in that and are kind of used to that sort of noise going on late at night anyway.
My understanding is it's a public consultation and anybody and everybody can participate, but it's a question of how do we to get to those most difficult groups to actually find them, how to get them to participate. And it's something which I think we will go and look at and see what we can do to make sure that the right people get to hear about the consultation.
A friend's niece has recently started as a young woman working in one of those places and has left because of the behaviour of the clients when drunk.
It's something which I'm fully aware of and something which I'm in the process of trying to do something about. Councillor Barnes and... Oh, sorry.
Just to remind members that this is simply an information report. You will get your opportunity at the next committee where I feel that we may have this conversation again, but certainly when it comes to the consultation period, we will look at promoting it in the correct manner that we do with all consultations by way of media, online and direct emails.
Councillor Barnes.
Thank you, Chair. As another regular attender of the licensing subcommittee, the meetings that relate to premises are open meetings and are videoed and available for members of the public to see how we do our job. And I think that's really important. Very often, even if it's in a CIZ situation, we may well think that it's good enough to approve, but put conditions on it. For example, opening hours, or very often the police don't want premises to be open all night, but they say till 1 o'clock, say that they are content. So we are able to vary the conditions so that we get the best balance between the operator making a living and the public being safe. So I think that anybody who wants to have a look at our work, they can go back and see us in action and see how we are quite careful in actually delivering.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I was just trying to help out responding to Councillor Lawrence's question. The information in relation to staff who may be injured or subject to an assault will be held on a crime report held by the police.
I think it's worth repeating that the next meeting will not be determining any future on the cumulative policy. It'll be the first stage of the process, and there'll be multi-layered, multi-processes, lots of opportunity for members and members of the public to consider. We will then put them forward together in a consultation document, which will then come back to committee for us to consider whether we want to put it out for consultation. So it's a long, drawn-out process with a lot of hard work. This is just the first bite of your cherry. There's a hell of a lot more cherries out there to nibble at. So can I ask for your approval to note this report and come back at the June meeting for the next stage of this process? All those in favour? We are unanimous. I think that concludes the meeting today. It's 8:05. I wish you a safe journey home.